Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Reader. Today I am doing another book revival show. These are videos where I talk about books that I might not have mentioned in a long while on my channel, or not at all, that I might have read years and years ago when I was not very active on BookTube or active at all. And that's all it is. It's a mix of genre. I don't go in any specific genre. I will do more specific genre recommendation, and I've been doing them here and there, but these are just random books that they stuck with me. They might not be my favorite of all time, but they were still very remarkable and I would still want to shout out on my channel. So without further ado, I've got 10 here, another 10 for you to go through, and let's do it. And if you want to check out the first one I've done, I'm gonna link it down below. And I am also filming these in August and it's kind of hot in here. Not complaining, I'm never gonna complain because summer has a good hot day here in UK because it's a miracle, but yeah, that's why I might be a bit sweaty when you see these. And okay, so first of all I have The Summer That Melted Everything by Tiffany McDaniel, who wrote one of my favorite books ever called Betty. Now this is not a sequel or a prequel, but it's somehow interconnected very at the end, so it's in the same world, it's in our world, it's in the same town that Betty takes place in. You don't have to read one or the other, they are absolutely their own thing. These books take place in Ohio, and the local prosecutor of this small town in Ohio, he published an invitation for the devil to come into town. And a few days after, a 13 years old black boy is found in the town abandoned, and he claims to be the devil. And the local prosecutor and his son, they take the boy in, and although they believe that of course he's been abandoned and they're trying to put the pieces together on who this boy is, he does speak in riddles, this boy, and he does claim to be the devil. And he arrives when heat wave also hits the town and it's scorching hot. The atmosphere, together with the writing, it's just something else. This is the first book of the author I read, and then I continue on to read Betty, which blew my mind. It's an experience, one of her books, and this book touched me so profoundly that every time I look at it, and it's just right next to my desk, so it happens every bloody day, I just have some this squishing in my chest. And there's this blur here that says, Fielding Bliss has never forgotten the summer of 1984, the year a heat wave scorched the small town of Breathed, Ohio, the year he became friends with the devil. And it's just, yeah, this book has my heart, and of all of those books I'm gonna mention, this is probably my favorite. It's one of the, because I put Betty on my favorite of all time, I didn't put this, but it's very close. A fantasy it's coming up now. Many people are mentioning it, or they might read it. I've seen a few people TBR, but I've read this decades ago and I loved it, and I just want to recommend it if it makes sense. Jump on, this train while it's kind of start going again. It's Kushal's Dart. This is epic high fantasy. It's the first series is 3 books, and then you follow some descendants in the next trilogy, which I never finished, but I should. And this is the story of this courtesan. She is sold and works as a sex slave in this house where she has a mark in her eye that makes her stand out from other courtesans, because she means that she can withstand physical pain more than others. And so this book has BDSM, is how you call it, from the 50 Shades of Grey shade. It has BDSM moments in it, and there are sexual content in it, but it's not what you think it is. It's truly a political intrigue, epic high fantasy, where there's conquest, there are love and loss and death and traveling, and it's the whole package, with also some BDSM interwoven in. And it's not the most prominent part of the story, albeit it's there, it's undeniable, there are some scenes. I think this book doesn't get the reputation that it should have, because it's truly a great epic high fantasy, and I was just immersed in the first trilogy. I devoured it, I was obsessed. Let's talk about Wayward Pine by Blake Crouch. I've not read anything else by this author, and I listened to the audiobook for the whole trilogy. But I was obsessed with it. I love this, and I will get my hands on physical copies of this. The first book is called Pines. Yeah, Pines. We follow Ethan Burke, who is a special agent who comes into this small town, apparently innocuous small town, and because he's looking into the disappearance of two of his colleagues. And so he comes to town, he has a car accident, so he wakes up in the hospital, unfortunately, and he goes from there, he starts to put together this investigation. The only thing is that once he got into town, he can't get out. And it's so good. Like, if you like thrillers and you really want a unique plot, just do yourself a favor. Every book is amazing of this trilogy. I loved the concept. I loved how action it was. It kept me on the edge of my seat. It was greatest. It was very, very good. And I would suggest that if you enjoy this, you should give a try to From, this TV show, because the premise is very similar. It's From is horror, but I would say the Pine is horror as well to a certain extent. And yeah, just brilliant. The Pine trilogy, the Wayward Pine trilogy, it's brilliant, and I would definitely read way more by this author. So good. Something from the Night Side. This is by Simon R. Green, I believe that's the name of the author. Yes. So this is what it was, my Dresden File. I know that Dresden Files are a very popular series. I've read the first one. It was okay. I will continue on probably. But for me, when it comes down to the kind of urban fantasy, when you have this kind of alternate dimension, this is The Night Side. I've read the first three, and I read them in Italian some decades ago, but I will reread them and move on because I was very much into this series. You follow this detective who has the ability to move to the night side, this alternative reality in London where things are not as it seems and a lot of creatures roam around, and he's an investigator, and what he does is solve cases, but he does solve his cases in the night side, and I just found it was brilliant. I will reread it, and hopefully it withstand the test of time. But if you want to give it a try, if you have, please let me know in the comments down below, because I've never met someone who's read these, and I was obsessed with those three books, and they were not published at the time in Italy after post book number 3, but there is a whole series here in English that I can get my hands on, and I will reread the first 3 books if I can, and then move on to the 4th and onwards. But just urban fantasy detective has all the elements that I love, and I would strongly suggest this, especially if you like the Dresden File. It might be like a good alternative. Monday is not coming. Monday is not coming. It's one of the most recent reads on this list, so it's like a tiny revival because I've just read this last year, but it's one that I don't think I shouted out enough in my videos. It was on my favorite of the years. It's the story of 2 best friends. One goes missing, Monday goes missing, and you follow the other best friend trying to put together the pieces of what happened to Monday. And it's a contemporary story, and it's gut-wrenching. And what happens in this book, what I thought this book was up until the very end, and then it twisted on its head. I was just like, this woman is a genius. I really love her writing. I listened to this on audiobook. I was mind blown at how good this story was. And it also looks at contemporary issues, very relevant issues, on a light that's not that often done, in my opinion, in contemporary stories. And I don't want to spoil absolutely anything, but the problem that she's highlighting this book is something that it's usually looked at from a different perspective and not on that one. And I really loved what she did with this book. I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. And the next one is for, you know how a few years back, urban fantasy, adult urban fantasy with erotica elements in it was all the buzz, and I think nowadays they're not really anymore. But there used to be, and I used to be obsessed with them, and I read tons of them. but one that really stood out to me and I want to shout out today is the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, and the first one is called Dark Lovers, and I've read probably 7 books in this series, and I will continue on. And this is, you follow in each book different protagonists. However, at times some books will go back to some of the protagonists you've already followed. And in the first book you have Wrath. Wrath is the commandant. He is the leader of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, who are vampires. They hunt these creatures that are not really vampires, but kind of, but they're like the bad guys. Like, vampires are not bad guys in this. So he's the leader of his elite squad of warriors. His name is Wrath, and as I said, and his comrade, his long-term confidant and friend, dies, and he leaves Wrath the task to protect his half-human child. So this man that died, this vampire that died, had a child with a human, and now Wrath has to take care of his young woman, and he goes there and invites her to his ward so he can take care of her. Her name is Beth, and the story, it gives you what you want to, with a bit more depth. Like, I think the characters, because the books are quite long, are explored quite well, but you got sexy time, you got muscles, you got hot vampires who do not glow in the dark, and they have sexy times, and it's love stories but also action stories, and eventually you got some books and some of the characters are queer, and it's just a very good urban fantasy erotica romance series, in my opinion. But also, if you like morally dark, like very problematic characters, you have to get to the book of Zadist. I think it's called Zadists, and Bella. Oh, their story. Their story. Good times, brings up a lot of good memories. And then let's move on to something very, very different. Let's move on to actually a sort of dystopian horror, which is very much out of my usual comfort zone. I don't like dystopian stories, but this book I read when I did my challenge of reading 10 translated from Japanese horror stories, and I didn't mind this. Actually, I found it quite entertaining, and the book is The Crimson Labyrinth, and it's on the similar veins of The Running Man by is it Richard Bachman? That's actually Stephen King, where you have this competition where these people, random people, are put in this labyrinth and they need to survive, and the fight is to the death. And it's a reality TV show, and you got your main protagonist is a math major, but who isn't employed, and then you got a woman who draws erotic comics to live, and a bunch of other characters, and there is no button to exit. You either have to make it your way through it or you die trying. And it was just entertaining. It was just gross at times. It's full of horrific stuff happening. People are put through horrific challenges and they have to survive. Many won't, but yeah, it's just very much entertaining, and I loved what it was. It's not too long, and I just really had a good time. And from horrific ways to die, we go into actual love. And I don't read many romances, but I really enjoyed this romance. And also, I'm not religious, and this is a religious romance, just like a weird combo, but I promise it worked. This is Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. I've read, I think, a couple of things by the author, but this is the one that really stuck with me a lot. Of Angel, she's sold into prostitution when she's a young child, and she is grown up, and she has grown up resentful and hateful towards men and life. And she meets Michael. Michael is a very religious man who receives this call from God to marry Angel and to be faithful and there for her at all times. And she has a hard time with it. And this romance, it was so good. The writing was so good, the romance was so good, that me, not being religious and not being into romance, I couldn't put this book down. I found very, very touching story, and yeah, I then went on and read more by the author. So Redeeming Love, it's a good one. Last couple of things, I've got another contemporary, The Poet X. This is quite, I would say, it was quite popular when it came out, so you might have heard of this, but this is told into prose is a very quick read. I think I had another one of these in my previous video of books told into prose. It's just a theme, isn't it? I've not read many of those, but the couple I have, they really stuck with me clearly. And this is, it says from the back, it's a novel about first love and finding your own voice. But I remember of these, not only the slam poetry, the poetry in the these was it was amazing, but also like the message of this girl trying to fight back against her own parents' prejudice, and her relationship with her mother, specifically the way she talks to their mother toward the end, really struck a chord within me. Like the fierceness of this girl that does not want to be silent, and she finds a way not to be silent. It was just a very quick read, but very profound. And some of the poems in these I wrote down, like I quoted and wrote down just to keep for further reference, because I was so much impressed by them. And thus I picked this book. First of all, I really enjoyed it, but I had just finished reading Shogun, and Shogun ends on a specific period of time in Japan, and I then looked up and I saw my shelf full of historical fiction. I was like, yes, that book was so good, and I thought I need to recommend this. So my last book for today is The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet by David Mitchell. Now, David Mitchell wrote Cloud Atlas, which I've not read yet, but I will, because I love his writing. And this is a historical fiction about a Dutchman who arrives in Nagasaki, which is the only place in that period of time. We're talking about 18th century, so for around 200 years, so 18th century and I believe it's 17th century, potentially 17th and 18th, but don't quote me on these. Nagasaki was the only place where, you know, foreigner could trade within Japan, so they were not allowed in the mainland. And you follow this Dutchman who just thinks to go there, make his fortune, go back home. Instead, he doesn't make his fortune, but he loses his heart. And I found this story where it's a very quiet, for the majority of it, not too eventful story, but there is action in the end. There's a lot of action in the end. I found the writing, I found the atmosphere, getting to know, you know, Jacob and his story, his love, and his friends and enemies, so fascinating. This man could write anything probably, and I would find it quite fascinating. And after these, I decided to buy Cloud Atlas, because I did not like the movie, so I never reached out for the book. But after reading this, I was like, nope, I need to read other stuff by this author. He managed to be almost like a slice of life that left such a mark that I was like, I want to read all the slices of your life moving forward, or all the stories you want to put out. I was truly impressed, and if you are into historical fiction, I would suggest these. I remember reading these and then Memory of a Geisha, but although I did appreciate that book as well, I didn't love it as much as I loved this one. I loved this in its all, while Memory of a Geisha, for example, worked very well in the beginning, but didn't work that well toward the latter part of the story for me. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these. If you're new, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around. I'll see you next time. Ciao!